We have one more virtual presentation this morning. This is from Jill Comer, who is a senior exhibition specialist at the Harvard Art Museums. She will be presenting Disrupting the View, Floating Plates, Uncovered Porcelains at the Harvard Art Museums.
Hello, I'm Jill Comer, Senior Exhibition Specialist and Mount Maker at the Harvard Art Museums. Thanks so much to the IMF for having me. In July of 2022, the Harvard Art Museums opened an installation of Arlene Shechet's recent work, displayed alongside works from our own collection of porcelain and decorative arts. In this photo, our designer, Ellie Glenn, is on the left, the artist Arlene Shechet is at right, and Steve Dean, my fellow Mount Maker, is at center. Much of the artwork in this exhibition would be vulnerably accessible, and the display ideas would demand new approaches to conservation and mount making. Many of the objects were uncovered, including in embedded wall niches, and in floating grids of plates on cast concrete pedestals and as freestanding sculptures in multiple parts. Here is a shot of the gallery at night from outside, which I think really conveys how densely packed and exposed an installation we were tasked with securing. We call this gallery the Winter Garden, and while it has glass on three sides, it is a very small space, heightening our safety concerns. When we first started to work on the Arlene Shechet exhibition, we were all at home because of COVID-19, and my role was remote mount design and mechanical problem solving from afar. After an early iteration of mounted plates on a vertical sheet of glass, the design quickly evolved into a metal framework from which plates would branch out. We had several Zoom meetings with Arlene and her team, and Ellie continually updated his design drawings as we began to hone our ideas for how the mounts could be attached and articulated. The main challenge for mounting the plates was to figure out how to safely secure them onto the display armature, and there was also a desire to tip the plates in different directions. This is the prototype that I fabricated out of brass at right, and you can see at center left an example of a plate mount stem. The end that attaches to the grid has a U-channel that fits onto the square stock and is secured with two set screws. We designed an articulated elbow joint which allowed us to tilt the plates once they were secured to the grid. Where the stem attaches to the plate, we added a rubber washer, which allowed the plates to have some flexibility if interfered with once on view. We experimented with many rubber washers of different durometers to get just the right resistance to pressure. In the end, we had the parts for the grids and for these mount stems fabricated for us out of steel, both for the increased strength it would provide and for the ease of milling the intricate and precise mechanisms. I'll return to this mounting system later, but first I want to touch on Arlene's planning visit to the museum a year ago in September 2021. In preparation for Arlene's visit, everyone on our exhibitions crew had a hand in making mock-ups and temporarily deinstalling the Winter Garden Gallery. Steve made cardboard versions of the pedestals and wall niches, and I mocked up Ellie's printouts of the plates and cardboard and devised a system for clamping them onto the model of the grid armature fabricated in wood so that we would be prepared to make the most out of the one-day visit. During the visit, we went through the gallery, fine-tuning the layout of the exhibition, and slowly began placing cardboard plates on the two grids. In the afternoon, we worked in the museum's Art Study Center, laying out the artwork that would go in the niches and atop the pedestals, and I took as many notes and pictures as I could to prepare for the mount making to come. The two mock-up hanging grids were moved to the mount shop, still intact for further measurements. Steve and I met with Angela Chang and Tony Siegel from the Objects Lab, and we made lists of what plates would need traditional mounts and which plates were good candidates for a new mounting system of adhering an aluminum disc to the foot of a plate, a more experimental and direct approach. In this slide, you can see examples of the more traditional brass plate mounts that we made, which secure the plates at 3 points along the rim, with the top clip providing mechanical attachment. In total, Steve and I made 45 plate mounts, including the discs, not to mention the many other mounts fabricated for decks, wall niches, and freestanding sculpture. I'm going to pivot to Tony and Angela's piece of this project, namely researching adhesives for mounting. For the objects on concrete desks, Tony experimented with flexible mounting using silicone. In Angela's words, since porcelain is an incredibly strong yet brittle material, we were most concerned with physical damage. We worried that mechanical brass mounts that fix objects to a deck could cause damage if someone tried to pull in an object. So going against the usual approach of immobilizing an object, Tony experimented with building in flexibility with adhesive mounts. Here are some of his tests using silicone caulk. When silicone sets, it remains flexible and rubbery, and if it is applied thickly, this effect increases. I'd like to make clear that silicone is not a material we normally apply to hard objects, so we tested ways to remove it safely, such as applying an intermediate reversible layer between the object and silicone. In this case, it was clear tape. Here are a couple of examples of objects that were secured with silicone caulking during installation. We assisted Sue Costello from Conservation during install, and plenty of time was allowed for the silicone to cure. While we were experimenting with aluminum discs for the plates in the mount shop, Tony in Conservation was doing his own experimenting with flexibility and trying different adhesives. He was also using a rubber stopper as a washer. Here, Tony demonstrates the strength and flexibility of this design. Also, the plates can turn without loosening. I'm not going to play this whole video as it upsets my stomach a little bit. For the final plate mounts, we ended up using adhesive mounts to attach aluminum discs to smaller and lighter plates with B72, and traditional brass mounts for larger, heavier plates. Also, if a plate had previous breakage and repair, or any additional surface paint or historic markings, we went with a traditional mount, as the acetone used for removing an adhered mount could affect the plate's surface and repair. Steve fabricated the aluminum discs and painted them to match the plates, and then I assembled the parts it left to make half of the mount stem. They were then handed off to Angela to be adhered to the plates with enough time for the B72 to fully set. The picture at left shows the two different types of mounts in action, the top being an adhered disc and the bottom a more traditional style mount. The picture at right is an example of reversing the design of a traditional mount in order to show the back of a plate. In this image, you can see mounts made for nearly identical plates in order to see both sides, something that was important to the artist. On the first day of installation, we began by assembling and hanging the two prefabricated steel grids from the ceiling. Ellie supplied us with extensive drawings of the plate layout, and from there we were able to pre-install the plates on the grid so that when Arlene arrived, we could adjust the angles of display, some up and down, some right and left. The pre-install also allowed us to drill divots into the grid so that the set screws would not fail, which helped me to sleep easier. Moving away from the plates now, I'm going to show you mounts for one of the wall niches that was uncovered to present two different examples of objects with invisible or nearly invisible mounts. Here is a finished installation shot of a niche at right, and at left you can see some pictures from Arlene's visit during which the objects were arranged in tandem with the objects displayed in front of the niches on the three concrete pedestals. The niche had a removable deck plate, in this case a mirrored acrylic sheet. So for the teacup at the top left, I made a brass mount that could be bolted through the deck. Angela glued the mount to the foot of the cup with B72 in advance, and then I attached the object to the mirrored panel right before installation. In a similar way, the cylindrical sculpture below had a hollow opening at back, so I made a mount that would lock into place inside the object's inner form, which also was then mechanically attached to the panel. Once both objects were attached and in place, the deck was then carefully placed and secured within the niche. My last example of using adhesives involves us physically altering one of Arlene's sculptures, hopefully for the better. At left is the exhibition curator, Lynette Roth, standing next to a sculpture called Grammar. Grammar came to us in two parts, the bottom of which is a welded steel base with a painted wood cylinder attached to it. Resting on top is a large ceramic piece, but it had no means of securing to the base, and with felt pads stuck on the bottom, it could easily be pushed off despite its weight. All we had to work with was an existing hole, as you can see at right. Our solution, in collaboration with Arlene's team, was to fabricate a 1/16 inch stainless steel plate that would be B72 to the bottom of the ceramic, with an undersized drilled hole located precisely at the point where the hole in the ceramic was located. That way, we were able to drill into the steel base and attach a brass rod or pin that could be received by that stainless steel hole without ever engaging the cracked and fragile hole in the ceramic. Hopefully, this slide can give you a better idea of the interplay between the two pieces. Angela adhered the steel disc to the sculpture, and at install, we simply set the ceramic piece atop the base, engaging the pin in the hole, and further secured it with museum wax as the hole was not centered. This process resulted in stabilizing the two facets invisibly, which was important to the artist. Lastly, two cylindrical mounts were screwed to the floor, engaging the feet of the base to prevent tipping. Thanks so much for listening to my talk. I don't often work with living artists and with so many moving parts, so this project was especially challenging. I couldn't have done it without Steve Dean and all the fruitful collaborations with so many of our museum colleagues, especially Tony, Angela, and Sue from the Objects Lab. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jill. Great presentation.
Thanks. Hi, everybody.
Thank you, Jill, for being able to change gears so quickly as well.
Yeah, we appreciate that.
I know, I wish I was there. I got COVID last minute, so.
We hope you're feeling okay.
Sorry, BJ. Was this exhibition a temporary or permanent installation?
It's temporary, but it's up for 3 years, which is pretty long for us.
Is the collection the artist's collection, or is it the museum's collection?
It's both.
Thank you.
Is that too short an answer? Should I embellish?
Hello, I have a question. Can you speak a little bit about removing the B72, the process involved?
See, this is where I wish Angela was here to answer these questions. I think generally what they do, but if there's a conservator in the audience, they could probably say better. I think generally what they do, like they would take a plate and actually put it in a bag and have some sort of source of acetone, and that would soften it up. And they would be able to remove that mount. One of the things we did was we drilled extra holes in the aluminum discs so they could also get solvent in that way. But again, when they applied the B72, they also had glass micro balloons. So somehow the B72 was thicker, and so I think that would involve a little bit of extra work removing it.
Are there concerns about adhesive failure over 3 years?
I mean. We were concerned, but we did tests, and so far so good. It's worked really, really well.
Since the installation, has there been any damage to the plates?
No.
And then looking back, would you change any mounting techniques?
No, I don't think we would. Probably just for the sheer fact that we haven't had any problems. I think I did express in the slideshow that we were pretty nervous, and especially throughout the process when we were trying to make up our minds what we were going to use. Like, it was a little bit stressful because it goes counter to how we usually display things. But like I said, the gallery is small. People are instructed to. The security attendants try to only keep it to 8 viewers at a time. And like I said, so far so good.
What durometer did you ultimately settle on for the rubber washers, and have you noticed any degradation to them over the period of the display?
I mean, I think we're hoping that they'll be fine just for 3 years. It's 70A, which is considered hard. I wrote that down because I'm not that familiar, but I figured someone would ask. We're expecting them to be, we tighten them. So there's a machine screw that goes in and tightens the disc to the mount stem, and they're fairly tight. So like in the video, like if you spin a plate, it's not going to loosen the screw, but there is still some flexibility. So I would imagine that that shouldn't be too affected in 3 years.
Could you elaborate on the application of the silicone where you said that there was a tape layer that was the barrier layer between the actual object and the silicone? Was how I interpreted it, and how the tape would possibly affect the object.
Well, again, this is a question for a conservator, but the tape was only applied to glazed ceramics, and I'm sure they wouldn't have applied it to something that was at all fragile or had any issues. So I'd imagine it should pull off very easily once the show is over.
On the articulated elbows, did you do any kind of tooth or gearing inside that to make sure that it wouldn't slide or droop over time?
No, the thing we did is it's just a simple machine screw, but I don't know if you can see this. This is so dweeby. Can you see this? The joint is made so that it can only go so far in either direction, and we did tighten them up as tight as we could. So it seemed pretty solid, and if for some reason something were to happen, it wouldn't go all the way down or all the way to one side. It has a stop to it. Again, this is like my first time making a mount that is movable, which is, I guess, pretty terrifying.
Any more questions? I think we have one more question.
Hi, thank you. Can you talk a little bit about working with Arlene Shechet and having a ceramicist decide how you're going to display ceramics from your collection?
I mean, it was overall pretty positive. I mean, I think the things that were, anxiety producing for me weren't necessarily directly from Arlene. It was more just sort of the overall concepts. Like, I mean, kind of the idea to float a lot of plates, and especially some from our collection, was sort of decided, I mean, without necessarily my consultation, curatorially. So it was just going to happen. And trying to think, I mean, like I said, I am not used to working with living artists so much, but it seemed to go as smoothly as it could, if that answers your question.
Hi, one more question. You said you started the design of these mounts during COVID. What software were you using to design the mounts?
Well, I was just kind of drawing by hand and emailing pictures back and forth, but Ellie then kind of took that over, and I'm pretty sure he used SketchUp to make his drawings, because he was sending drawings to Arlene back and forth and then checking in with us. So I was more like, I mean, once I was able to get in, because at a certain point I was able to go into work every so often, and then I would work on the prototypes then. So SketchUp, I'd say.
Hi, really nice display there. I like that. I was curious, exactly what kind of clear tape did you use?
Again, I'm not 100%, but I think it's probably just that crystal clear tape, just regular tape.
Like Scotch tape?
Like a packing tape, kind of.
Packing tape, that's what I thought. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Jill, thank you so much. We're really glad you were able to present.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun.